Welcome, everyone, to the Gridiron Review Podcast. I'm Zach, that's Jack, and we are back for episode 8 of our Offseason in Review series. This is the real episode 8. Yesterday was actually 7. We are closing out the NFC North with the Green Bay Packers, which are easily the team to beat in this division. They had one of the more interesting off seasons with major drama, departures, retirement threats, and all that good stuff. And a weird draft, to put it lightly, to say the least. And what we feel like that resulted in and where they stand, find out now.
Offensively, the only players retained by Green Bay were third-string quarterback Kurt Benkert and tight end Robert Tonyan. They lost MVS, who I'm sure the equipment staff is very happy to have lost. Equinemius St. Brown, Lucas Patrick, Billy Turner, and Dennis Kelly. And their only free agent pickups were Elise Mack and Sammy Watkins. This offense should explode and win week 1 with how Sammy Watkins usually plays in week 1. And outside of that, who knows? But right now, this team is in a little bit of trouble. I mean, Rodgers is still talking about retirement, and it sounds like at the very least he'll be here for this year. But for a guy that just signed a 4-year deal, I don't see any situation where he's probably there in any of the other 3 years of this contract, which is okay for him because his contract is heavily front loaded. But this team has the potential, as we've talked about earlier in the week, to be dethroned by teams like the Vikings and the Lions because Watkins had injury problems and he's usually a week 1 guy, and that's about it. Lazard is holding out right now for what I would assume is a contract. You lost your receivers 2 and 4 in MVS and St. Brown. And we've heard reports that Christian Watson, who they traded up in the second for, is having issues with drops right now. The last thing that Rodgers needs in an offseason like this is to not have one of the only guys that he has familiarity throwing to. And that's not to say Cobb and Amari Rodgers are nothing, but they aren't your outside guys. Those are slot heavy guys. Rodgers was primarily a return guy last year, I believe. And on the offensive line, they did make some improvements. They drafted Sean Ryan in the 3rd round of the draft. They took Zach Tom in the 4th, and they took Rashid Walker in the 7th from Penn State. Walker is a guy that I've heard good and bad about. Ryan, I did not get a chance to look at, but Zach Tom was a guy that I had a day 2 grade on. He is a little bit undersized as he plays around 292, I believe, at his time at Wake Forest, was playing tackle. He's a guy that, could use some time to work on stuff, but I think down the line could be a really solid starter for the Green Bay line. And I think that he's a guy that could be a gem from day 3 of this draft. And the only other thing to add here is, does it really matter how long Rodgers has to throw the ball if there's no one getting open down the field?
Yeah, I mean, look at their playoff loss to the 49ers. I know the weather wasn't great, but even with Devontae Adams, they couldn't get anything going. And I fully blame it on Rodgers, but to be fair, even with Adams, there wasn't a ton of pass catching options. I mean, MVS got a big contract from the Chiefs, but realistically, he has not been consistent and proven that he can be a $10 million a year receiver. Maybe he does with the Chiefs, maybe not. Lazard has flashed here and there, but he has not been a consistent weapon. And maybe that is because Devontae Adams had so many targets. But when you have a guy like Rodgers who likes his veterans, he doesn't like to throw to rookies and young guys. I mean, this offense is in trouble. And even, with regular season Rodgers, you're probably going to win the division. There is an outside shot that the Vikings or the Lions can unseat them if they have a couple injuries, if they really tumble. But Rodgers is going, in the regular season, I keep saying that because I think he does suffer in the playoffs, but it's not the point. Rodgers is going to do everything he can, at least for this season. To Jack's point, the contract is set up to where he could retire at any season. It's not like he's committed to playing out the whole contract, and it is front loaded and all that good stuff. And he seems to be taking a liking to golf, so maybe he'll be one of those guys that goes on to the celebrity pro-am tournaments and stuff like that. They replaced MVS and Devontae Adams with Christian Watson, with Sammy Watkins. It's not good. We really liked Watson as a prospect. I thought he was a late first round projected player, maybe getting him in the second was fine. However, we'll talk about the defense, but their first round, we covered the draft. We gave it a really bad grade. It just, when you see your own division trading up 20 spots for basically a third rounder, and we know there was a second round pick swap, but whatever, and getting Jameson Williams, you just wonder how little it would have taken for the Packers to trade up and get Jameson or Chris Olave. I don't like Dotson, but maybe even Treylon Burks, although as Jack and I were talking about, he's having his own issues this OTA. But they're going to wish they had a presence like Jameson Williams, a deep threat, a guy that can take the top off, and a guy that's an elite route runner. And Watson is more of, to me, an MVS replacement. He's very similar, size, speed guy, not an elite route runner by any means. And I don't think the hands issues are as much as a panic as, the public's going to take with it now. Now, if you get into the regular season and it continues, that could be a problem. And I still think there's an off chance that Amari Rodgers comes out of nowhere to have a pretty good season, because that seems to be how Packers receivers work. Their first couple of years are not the best, and then they're just, second, third years, they figure it out. But their tight end room is weak. Robert Tonyan has only done it for 1 year, and I truly believe his double-digit touchdown was more about Rodgers than it was about Tonyan. And I think they're going to be a heavy running team. I think they're going to make sure Aaron Jones earns his contract and A.J. Dillon earns the draft slot they gave him. But our grade for them is it didn't feel like there was a plan. You should have gone into this draft knowing that the top receivers were going to go early. And you should have had a plan to trade up. I mean, there's so many trades in this draft, more than I can remember. And it didn't take much to move up. And listen, we can go on and on about this. We went into the team's draft review and we talked about this, but there also was a ton of free agents that they could have brought in. Julio Jones is still out there. I don't know why he has not been brought into Green Bay. Certainly feels like he should have been checked out over Sammy Watkins. It's weird. It's such a weird, if this was the year that they decided that Rodgers they were out on and they went with Jordan Love, this makes a lot more sense. Not investing too heavily into the weapons and just focusing on a running game. But no, you went and paid Rodgers a crap ton of money, and you didn't, I think it hampered the team. His contract is hampering the team's ability to get other guys, but I don't know. Rodgers is so good that he should be that kind of guy that players want to take a pay cut to go play for.
The issue for me here is that if Rodgers decides that he's going to retire after next year, you're now looking at a 2023 draft class that seems to be pretty strong and a little bit deep at both quarterback and receiver. But now you're in a year with one first round pick, and now you have to decide whether you want to take a receiver or roll with Love. And I mean, personally, if you kept Love, that means there's got to be something behind it. I think you roll with Love and try to get one of the top receivers in next year's class. But then if you take a quarterback, it doesn't solve the issues here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think they could have traded Love if they wanted to. I know the reports out there were that they were only being offered day 3 picks. I don't believe that, especially since most of the quarterbacks fell in this draft. So clearly people weren't high on them. And then the reverse of that is we got reports that Brian Flores wanted to take Jordan Love over Tua. And that's where the animosity grew between him and the organization. So I think they could have gotten a decent draft pick for him. And it didn't sound like they even came close. So I think you are right in that regard. I think Jordan Love still is the future for them, at least in their eyes. And I think in this day and age, when you have quarterbacks that start their rookie years, the top end quarterbacks, and at most they sit for a year and then they start. It's just rare to see a guy sit for more than just one season, basically, before he takes over. And now you're going to have Jordan Love sitting for at least 3, but Rodgers did the same thing. And I think that's easily overlooked, that there are plenty of examples of quarterbacks who didn't start right away. And Jordan Love was in the pick 20s. It's not like he was a top 5 pick, just hasn't gotten on the field. I mean, you could have chased Rodgers out and rushed Love out there and gotten, a Jay Cutler, I guess. That's like a weird name to pull from, but a guy that's high turnover, high passing volume type of guy. Or you could let Love sit for 3 years, continue to develop and learn. And if he takes over and he starts for 10 years for you, if he starts for 5 years for you, that's almost 35, 40 years straight of Pro Bowl caliber quarterback play, which is insane. So I will admit, the longer they keep Rodgers, the worse the Jordan Love pick seems. And I don't think it's because he hasn't developed. I think that's a little over. I think that's the media just taking a narrative and running with it. I mean, obviously you can't just kick Rodgers out when he's the talent that he is. Although I don't know that I would pay him what they did. That's a personal choice. Anyway, we could keep on. This offense is so questionable, so weird. Since the new regime took over, it's just been a really weird plan in the drafts, in the off seasons, in the free agency signings. It's just very strange. However, the reason we have confidence that the Packers are going to still be the team to beat in the division is the defense. They were able to re-sign massive fines last year in free agency, and I think even Rasul Douglas was a mid-season pickup. Devondre Campbell and Rasul Douglas played very well, and I think Campbell was or should have been an All-Pro. I can't remember if he actually got the vote or not, but Douglas was great, and they picked these guys up off the street. They aren't paying them a lot. They're paying them a lot now, but they're deserving it, and it was a great find for them. Most of their losses on defense, except for one, are depth pieces. Tyler Lancaster, Chauncey Rivers, Oren Burks, Chandon Sullivan, Isaac Yiadom, everybody's favorite corner in Green Bay, Kevin King, and Henry Black, their backup safety that did play meaningful minutes when Darnell Savage got hurt. But their biggest loss was Darius Smith. He didn't play a lot last year because of the back injury, but he was their best pass rusher. And they replaced some of the depth with Jarran Reed, Chris Slayton, and Keyshawn Nixon. Reed is the only one I think that'll play meaningful snaps for them as far as the free agent signings on defense. And then we get in the draft. Well, before that, I want to just say, I think Zadarius Smith's production, they felt comfortable letting him go to Rashawn Gary's ascension. It's taken him a couple of years, but I think he had like 9.5 sacks last year. And you may see him take the next step again. And I guess they chose Preston Smith over Zadarius, which is weird, but whatever. The draft is where it got really strange for this Packers team, as we've kind of alluded to. Instead of trading up for a receiver, they took Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt in the first round. The Walker pick, while we like the prospect, the fit is so weird. They went and paid Devondre Campbell. They had Chris Barnes, undrafted free agent, who's played pretty well for them. And it just felt like a first-round investment in an inside linebacker was odd, to say the least. Devontae Wyatt, we did not like. I thought he was an average prospect. I thought there was tackles like Travis Jones that I liked way more. And it's even stranger when you look at the fit. They have Kenny Clark and, like I said, signed Jarran Reed. And if Devontae Wyatt is, he's kind of like a combo tackle end, but if he's playing end, his elite athleticism is not so elite. He's not developed as a pass rusher. It's just a really weird pick. I really didn't like it. There was other pass rushers I would have taken absolutely ahead of him if that was the goal. And if you just wanted to tackle, there was multiple still on the board I would have taken instead of him. They did kind of make up for it a little bit with fifth rounder Kingsley Enagbare, a massive steal by all accounts. He's got a lot of upside as a pass rusher. Will he develop? Unknown, but it's the kind of guy that you take in the fifth that you can actually see providing meaningful snaps sooner rather than later. And then they rounded out their draft on defense with Tariq Carpenter and Jonathan Ford, two depth pieces that may or may not make the roster. Jack, you want to discuss the defense?
Yeah, to Zach's point, I think that this is what's going to keep them afloat. This is, they threw the money at it with Campbell and Douglas and the draft picks. And Walker was a guy that I was very high on, but like Zach said, it didn't make sense here. Chris Barnes is a fine number 2 linebacker. Campbell, like Zach said, we can't remember if he got the vote or not, but was playing at an all-pro level. And there's money in the secondary. They just re-signed Jair. They re-signed Rasul. Stokes is on a rookie deal. And it's just, how long are they going to hold up, though, if this offense is going 3 and out all the time? And, is the pass rush really all that much better? It's hard to say because you chose Preston over Zadarius, and I think that was one heck of a decision. And, I think Zach covered the defense really well. I think the one thing that I want to note about this team is that you threw a lot of money at some random people like Preston Smith. What has he done to earn that money? And like, if your plan was to go to Walker, then why re-sign Campbell? And I just don't feel like the money went to the right place. I mean, at that rate, if you didn't waste all your money on these other guys, you could have at least, not that he wanted to be there, but you could have at least thrown a bigger contract at Devontae, tried to convince him. There's so many other things that you could have done, and we'll probably mention his name a couple other times throughout this series, but DJ Chark went for $10 million. Are you seriously telling me that you're going to pay Preston Smith over going out and trying to throw a contract like that at DJ Chark? No one thought he was going to go for 10 million, especially not with the Christian Kirk deal.
Yeah, and not even that, but also like guys like Allen Robinson. I mean, talk about replacing Devontae with a guy that probably doesn't make as much as he should because of the crappy quarterbacks he's had. I mean, so they had to be planning to take Quay Walker all along. This wasn't like, I mean, maybe they were thinking a wide receiver if they fell to them, but Quay Walker was 1A or 1B rather. So then why re-sign Devondre? I know they have more than one linebacker starting, but it's weird. It's very weird. And they could have not re-signed Devondre, taken Quay Walker, and used the money that they didn't use on Devondre to go get a meaningful receiver that this team is sorely missing right now, and still draft Christian Watson. Like, it's not like these are this or that. They could have, obviously you can't predict how the draft plays out, but you could have traded up slightly and taken Treylon Burks. Again, we know he's having his issues in camp, but still. And you could have taken Christian Watson in the second still, and you could have taken a linebacker in the third. There's plenty of linebackers there. Like, it's just, I don't know. It was weird. Again, we like Quay Walker. We really liked him as a prospect. Devontae Wyatt, not as much. But I said this before, but what was the plan? Like, what was the plan where I understand fortifying the defense, and that's not a bad idea, but your defense was already solid. Yeah, you could use another pass rusher, but they didn't even draft, with Devontae Wyatt, like they could, or even Quay Walker. Jermaine Johnson was still there at the Quay Walker pick, right? I'm trying to
I
think when the Jets
believe
traded up for him. It was like 24.
No, I think the Jets jumped where Tennessee was at 26 or 27.
Right. So Jermaine Johnson was still there when they took Quay Walker, and George Karlaftis was still there. David Ojabo was still there. I know Ojabo went in the second. Like, there's just so many guys that if you're looking for pass rushing help, that would have made more sense. Travis Jones went in the third, a much better value than Devontae Wyatt in the first. We went on the draft again, really bad grade on their draft. We liked some of the prospects, but it's just their whole offseason. Like, you couldn't find a better receiver than Sammy Watkins to throw into the room to take a chance on. There's plenty of guys that got signed that, I don't know. They could add OBJ, they could add Julio, and this could change a little bit. But as of right now, there's not even reports. I don't think that they brought anyone in recently.
I don't think so. And just about the draft class, for us, it's not what they took, it's the order in which they took it.
Yeah, it's like, DT/D lineman in general, linebacker. I guess you could argue. I don't know. I thought Chris Barnes was fine. Wide receiver, absolutely a need, but you think they could have flipped the order around a little bit and ended up with a better draft class. Also, they did go with Romeo Doubs in the fourth, which was, he's a deep threat. It was a nice double dipping at receiver, but unless Amari Rodgers takes a big step forward that people aren't expecting, this is going to be an offense that I think will just be average. They might be above average running offense, but I think passing wise, you're going to be paying Rodgers an awful lot of money to not do as much as you would want for that contract. That being said, we do have them going 11-6, again, primarily riding on an elite defense, one of the best in the league. And even if they didn't draft Wyatt and Walker, I think we'd still be talking about how good, especially their secondary is. So it's going to have them first in the division. I don't think they are any chance. Now, I could be wrong. I don't think there's any chance they even come close to a Super Bowl. It doesn't feel like they match up well with teams like the Rams, even, the Buccaneers when the time comes.
Or the Saints.
Yeah, the Saints should be a very good team. It just doesn't feel like the Packers are going to do too well when crunch time comes. And that's even not even counting Rodgers just not doing well in the playoffs in general. So we think this is the last year of the Packers' reign in the division, and look for next year for the Vikings and the Lions to continue upon what we think we'll see this season, where I don't remember if we had the Lions or the Vikings beating the Packers. I think we have the Lions maybe beating them once.
The Lions, I think we had splitting with them.
Right. And it might not happen, but it might happen. The thing to note is I think all four of the games between the Vikings and the Packers and then the Lions and the Packers will be close. And I think you'll see chinks in the armor of Green Bay, and it'll be signs of a turning of the guard. And maybe, Jordan Love takes over next year if Rodgers retires, which it really feels like it, and he provides similar play, then it won't, be as bad. But at some point, their contracts, their money situation, it's all going to fall off the cliff, and they're going to have to enter some kind of rebuild because they've been fighting off the inevitable. That concludes the NFC North for us. We are glad to have you along, and keep out as we start our next division.